Okay, welcome everybody. We acknowledge the Bungala and Kaurna people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and pay our respects to the elders past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. So welcome everybody. I think we have a full house, no apologies, which is good. It's nice to be in Adelaide on a bright, sunny day. Hopefully the same in Whyalla after your heat wave you've had. We'll move into declarations. Any declarations or conflicts of interest of any agenda items or any changes in positions that need to be recorded? Shakes of head, thank you. Okay, are any of the committee members requiring a in-camera session with the auditors or management? Pat? Laurie?
No.
Peter? No?
No.
Justin?
No.
Thank you. Justin, do you need anything with us? Okay. There's nil there. Okay, we have the minutes of the previous meeting on page 3. I think this indicates that this is not the full version, but my reading it is the full version of with all the confidential items in there as well, Kathy.
The actual the confidential items are in there purely and simply showing the resolutions that were passed to go into confidence, and then the resolutions that to keep the matter in confidence. It doesn't actually provide detail of the discussion held for those items.
Okay, I think we agreed last time if we can have those in our pack, that those confidential ones. Okay.
Yep.
It's had feedback. Anything from committee members, Peter, Pat and Laurie? Okay,
No.
we're good. I think then the resolution is to accept those minutes subject to the inclusion of the confidential matters which have been previously distributed. Can I have a mover for that? Thanks, Laurie. Seconder, thanks, Pat. All those in favour? Okay, moved. Thank you. All right, we've got the business arising and we have that on page, starting on page, let me catch up with my fingers. Page 17, thanks, Justin. Okay, Kathy, over to you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll take the report as read. As the covering report highlights that there are a couple of items that we haven't actually included on the agenda in this meeting due to quite a number of staff having COVID over the last couple of weeks. Those items include the emergency management and business continuity items that have been updated recently based on feedback from the Audit and Risk Committee. The review of Council's fraud and corruption policy is also yet to be done, and also the review of the Audit and Risk Committee's terms of reference. One further item that I will point out that is not on this agenda that we were originally planning to be on there was a first draft of Council's new strategic plan, which is based on and following a workshop that we held with the Council in December, and it's also flowing through from the development of the community plan as that is unfolding. Unfortunately, again, due to COVID, that plan itself is not part of the report on the agenda, which is inclusive of the asset management plans and the long-term financial plan. But we will circulate that out of session to the audit members prior to it actually going to council, hopefully in March. Other than that, I will take the report as read.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Pat, I'll go to you. Anything?
No, just look at page 21 of the papers, just items 9 and 10 there. I'm not entirely convinced that the status answers the item in relation to the effectiveness of the organisation's risk culture. It's more than just risk management. It's something broader, and I'm not sure. I think that's possibly been missed in the answer, or it might just be that there isn't anything to show that the organisation's risk culture is properly embedded. And just the other one, the civic building demolition update, I was just looking for progress.
Okay, we'll deal with the first one. Just on the risk culture side, Kathy, it talks about there's further work needed there. What's being envisaged?
The council for the last 3 years has been utilising the University of South Australia's organisational culture surveys to examine the nature of the organisation's culture. I have to say, and I will also defer to Sue King, who's also in attendance at this meeting, but that those culture surveys probably are not of a depth or breadth of survey that gives us a real understanding as to culture within the organisation, and then how that culture is impacting on organisational performance. And indeed, certainly there is no information in any of those surveys that we've done in relation to risk management or the risk culture across the organisation. So we've got no evidence from a survey perspective in the context of risk. And I would hazard to say also that the culture surveys that have been done are more climate checks, those sort of surveys that give time, as opposed to a real deep dive into culture. So those, just as a bit of background information, those surveys by the University of South Australia is a pilot test which has been run across Australia with multiple councils being involved, and I would suggest that it's not really actually delivered any sound outcomes from the council in the context of culture. Sue, did you want to add anything?
No, Kathy, I think that's a good summary. The surveys certainly don't touch on risk. What I will say is that there was a body of work started through the manager of governance and the governance team in early 2022 around working with managers around their risk profile for their directorate, to start to build that culture around risk in the organisation. And I think that's where it makes reference to there is still a further body of work that is required to do that.
Yeah, I think we capture it as an action. There needs to be further work. I can share some information around risk culture surveys, but I think we need that, even if we haven't put a date on it as yet, capture on our work program, because we need to think a little bit deeper around how we're going to articulate the risk culture. And a lot of that sits with the risk appetite statement and how you bring that through the organisation. So thanks for that, Kathy. Patty, you comfortable with that? Okay, we'll move into item 10.
Sorry, there was a second question there.
We'll move into item 10.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Yeah,
Cool.
item 10.
Okay.
In terms of the civic building demolition, so council has previously resolved to put both our Darling Terrace and our Egblom Street sites to the market through a request for proposal process. I expect that will be done during the month of February. We've been doing some work leading up to that. At the same time, the council agreed or resolved to do early contractor engagement to get an indicative price for the demolition of the civic building, so that we could then look at whether there was, through the RFP process, whether someone would potentially pick up the demolition as part of a new development on that site. I think the specifications have been done for the ECI, and just deferring to Kathy, if is that actually been released to market yet, that request for ECI responses?
And no, the specifications have actually been completed but not released to market as yet. I'm anticipating that will be within the next week.
Thank you. So we'll do those two pieces of work and see whether they converge, or whether we end up potentially with two separate processes, with us constructing somewhere else, and someone else potentially looking at the former civic building on Darling Terrace for an alternate development purpose.
That's really was consistent with what we've had before. Last time we spoke was, is it worthwhile actually having an independent sit there to say that your approach you're taking, this two-pronged approach and potentially merging, is the right approach, or there's other options? So I think that hasn't addressed that action item. So is that something that will be put in place, or has it been discounted and might be put in place?
No, it will be put in place. So we've received a suggestion as to who we can approach. When we do, so we'll get that independent advice. We also plan to use Renewal SA to test our approach to market, noting that we anticipate that the state government very soon will be announcing that they're going to be releasing some land for development purposes, and Renewal SA we anticipate will have a key role in terms of how those development sites or sites plural might be presented to market. So and then we've previously had some engagement with another company, so we'll probably end up getting some advice from 3 different quarters as to how best to approach the market.
When do you think that will happen?
Just all in the month of February.
Yep.
We are expecting the Premier and a number of ministers in Whyalla on the 25th or 26th of February.
Yep.
To make some announcements. You probably saw something in the media over the weekend. We are hoping at this point in time, we don't know for certain what the announcements will be. Between now and then, we hope to get some announcements or some insights in terms of what announcements the state will be making, and where possible try to influence or massage some of those announcements. If the state do not make any announcements regarding releasing land, we will use that forum as an opportunity to promote the fact that we have a number of development sites, and council has actively now engaged the market with our 2 sites. So definitely during the month of February, a lot of those things will actually come to fruition.
If we just have probably an email update at when you're at that point of that would be good for us, given we don't meet again until April, I think it is. Are you comfortable with that? Okay. Anywhere else you want to take us to? Laurie?
I think most of the issues, the questions I had have sort of been answered. The only thing I'd say is, just as a general thing, when we're going through action items and we are saying they're 100% completed, for me, that means we've actioned it, we've finished it, and we've closed it, don't have to look at it again. There's a number of the responses that sort of lead us to another area and say there's future work to be done. And I just want to make sure that when we are doing that within the responses, there's actually an ability to draw a link to say either it's not complete or it is complete, and whatever that future piece of work is refers back to this finding. Because if we ever go back and try to trace through, have we closed it off and is it done? We sort of lose track at the point when we say 100%. So just if we could just have a think about going forward with some of the status updates. For example, there's further work needed to embed a risk culture. If that's like an open-ended statement, how do we get it? So either links to a particular document or it's not there and it's closed. If we could, just for that completeness purpose for our perspective.
Can you take that on board, Kathy?
Absolutely.
Content-wise, I think we've covered the questions. Otherwise, I'm fine.
Thanks, Laurie. Peter?
No, good. Thanks, Grant.
Mine have been answered as well. Kathy, is there anything coming up in April that's at risk?
No.
Okay, that's good. Again, we've got a fairly, even though this was meant to be a bit light of agenda, we still have over 300 pages. I think we just need to be mindful just of load and timing on both management as much as the committee as well. All right, so we've got a recommendation there. Can I have a mover? Thanks, Peter. A seconder? Thanks, Pat. All those in favour in relation to the recommendation? Good, approved. All right, we'll move into the review of the asset management strategy and long-term financial plan. So Grant, I think you'll take this one.
Yes, that's correct. Thanks, Grant. So with this report, obviously at the moment we're undertaking our 4-yearly review of our strategic plans. As Kathy mentioned, the strategic plan itself is not included in this report. That's linked closely with the development of the community plan that's been happening through a number of workshops. The WTF process has been undertaken quite successfully. So these 2 documents here, I guess, are a little bit more. So the review of these has been a little bit more compact, I guess. So you would all remember we did a workshop, a joint workshop with the elected members and Audit and Risk Committee in December to work through some of the review of these documents. And really, it's about underlying assumptions rather than anything else. We know that, you know, one of our key drivers or key parameters of the council's budget is that the asset renewal, asset management strategy is fully funded. So our renewal is fully funded through across the term of that plan. So really, it was just you know, making sure it's updated for any new data that we have and testing for anything underlying that might be unusual in there. And with the long-term financial plan, as we know and discuss regularly, there's probably room for movement, I guess, in council's finances at the moment. So really, it was about testing those underlying assumptions, our assumptions around potential savings that can be built into the plan, what our drivers are for costs and income. So the review of these two, I guess, is a little bit easier, a little bit less linked to the community as we develop them. And as you can see in the report, we're sort of planning that because there's been so much consultation on the development of the community plan, and that's the community owned plan, that it's proposed that the consultation on these two documents won't be huge in terms of some of our other consultation processes that will really be making available to the community, allowing them to provide comment on them. Yeah, and so with the report, you'll see that we're quite open to the committee's feedback on either of these plans before they go to council and out for community consultation in late February.
Right, Grant, before I open up for discussion, just on the long-term financial plan, we were engaged with council prior to Christmas in relation to our view on where these plans should land. What was the conclusion of council? Because I noticed that break-even position is still further out than where I think the feel of the committee or the position of the committee was. So where did council land on that, I suppose, financial performance in the short term?
Yeah, well, as we discussed on the night, we worked through the things that we could build in. And so now we've brought the break-even position forward from where it was previously, and actually before, for council excluding the airport, it is before council's current adopted parameter around that. So they have a parameter of 26-27 reaching a break-even position, and so the plan projects that happening in 25-26 for council excluding airport. Obviously, the airport is, and as mentioned in the report, is a bit of an ongoing concern and something we're going to have to work through. Yeah, so rather than, I don't think we had a further specific conversation that night. I think after the audit committee members left, it was just that we built in all of those items that were discussed on the night. So in terms of some saving parameters and budget repair parameters. Yeah, so the long-term financial plan projections are better than they were before, and also, yeah, coming into a break even in year 2 of the plan. So I know there's been some discussion around happening in year 1, but without some very severe changes, which doesn't mean they can't happen. That was probably not going to happen.
All right, thank you for that. What we might do, if committee members are comfortable with, we might look at the long-term financial plan first and then do the asset management strategy. Are you comfortable with that, Peter?
Yep.
Laurie, you're nodding at me. Okay. So what we'll do is we will open it up for general discussion on the long-term plan. Peter, I might go to you first.
I don't have anything to add, Grant.
Okay, thank you, because you've been part of that council discussion as well. Laurie, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I'm curious to just discuss how we consider new projects and new initiatives in light of, you know, the activity that's going on outside of council in terms of this, and how we factor either potential growth or new activities in what we're doing. I'd be keen to just have some discussion on that to start with, if I could.
And just clarifying, you're talking about some hydrogen development and potential other development. So we've continued to take a what we'll say is a conservative approach in that we haven't brought to account potential increase in revenue associated with some of those developments, both in terms of the major projects and the hard infrastructure, as well as the potential residential development that's coming. In simple terms, the reason for that is that it's really hard to quantify what the revenue increases might be, both in terms of quantum and timing. So we've continued to err on the side of being sort of very conservative by not bringing that to account. We do expect that the state government will finalise its land transaction with council within the next couple of months. I'd like to think it would be before the Premier and Treasurer and other ministers come in February, but I'm thinking that there's a number of balls still in the air that is unlikely to potentially be resolved by then. So at this point in time, my best case guess is that the state will revert to council in the month of March with confirmation of what land it wants to acquire or lease, but or combination thereof. Maybe under the confidential discussion later in the agenda, I might unpack that a little bit more and share some insights in terms of what some of those balls are.
Potential impact is.
Yeah. So that's in terms of the hydrogen jobs plan. We've had some updates regarding the Port Bonython hydrogen hub. The state government has development deeds in place with now 6 companies. Those development deeds give a pathway for those companies to progress their developments, but in terms of rate income to council, it's not until such time that they submit a DA and there is a transfer of land ownership from the state to those companies that rate revenue will come online. We continue to get updates from the state government in terms of the likely timeframes, and particularly the first mover. It's likely that there'll be 1 or 2 companies that will be first movers at the hydrogen Port Bonython hydrogen hub. But again, it's still too difficult to quantify what the timing and value of that might be. Then you get to the broader subject of housing development. We are starting to see some signs of some market response to the excess demand over supply of good quality, reasonable priced accommodation in Whyalla. As recently as last week, we hosted a Singaporean company who's got a strong interest in doing serviced apartments in Whyalla, but again, in terms of trying to speculate when that development may come online and what the value of that development may be is just too problematic. So, we could do some sensitivity analysis, and Grant, I think, has done some in terms of potential timing of future revenue growth, but in the absence of being able to have more certainty, we continue to remain pretty conservative. Grant, did you want to add anything to that commentary, please?
Yep, certainly. So on a few different points there. So within the document itself, within the sensitivity analysis included there, so one of them looks at some potential models with some growth starting to come in at 0.5% growth per year and 1%. So not excessively large amounts of growth, but just show what will happen with that, and obviously what it projects that out in isolation, I guess, like all the sensitivity models. It's like what would happen if we got that extra revenue, and what that obviously does is makes council's financial position much stronger than it is now. And what we'd imagine is that the model probably wouldn't look exactly like that. It would be that either that would allow council to, after, once we get back to a break-even position, potentially have slightly lower rate increases or up service levels or build more infrastructure with that. So that's just to show the capacity building, I guess, that comes from that growth. One thing I will say that came up in discussion in the workshop in December was about what the thoughts on what that funding should go towards if we do manage to get some strategic land sales, and not that it shouldn't just be absorbed into, I guess, general revenue and such, and should be used to build something for community. I guess the issue we've got with it, using it in upfront to build something, is the capacity we've got on probably our ability to service that in the short term. So what the plan for that funding is, and we can discuss it sort of separately later on with when we look at financial reports for the foreshore master plan. So what council have looked at is that the interest savings, basically, that any strategic land sales will generate, sort of in the medium term, will look to fund the operating cost of any developments that happen at the foreshore. So it's giving council the capacity we've got the capacity up front to deliver it, but making sure we've got the capacity to operate it and take on that impact. But obviously it also gives us capacity longer term to potentially use some of that money for other strategic projects. But I think that was the balance in the medium term that worked, because if we'd just gone and spent any money we get for strategic projects upfront on more infrastructure, the real concern for us is the ability to fund the extra impost on our operating position over time. So I think hopefully that answers the questions on that.
Thank you. My follow-up to that, I guess, was I take those points on board that's what's going on. To some extent, in the absence of putting something in the long-term financial plan, which are estimates or assumptions around what type of activity is going to happen, it sort of, when you first look at it, reads more like it's a 1 to 2 to 3 year plan where we're actually managing what we've got today, and then we go out to the long term. We're going to say we're just going to leave it as nothing's going to happen. No growth, no inflation, no major projects, no big spend items. And so if I'm looking at it cold and going, well, where is the activity in that area? And it's sort of saying, well, actually, we're going to spend all our money in year 1 because we're going to bring things back into order, and then we'll gradually ease it out, and everything's going to be steady from there on. And I just wonder whether we're painting a picture there that's maybe not reflective of some of the other activity that's going on. That's all. It's probably an observation from my perspective.
I think we'll capture that observation in the notes, because I agree with that.
Yeah, and if I may respond to that, we speak on behalf of others. I agree with that assessment. Your view of the numbers and the context. Our lived experience with the state government over the last couple of years has been really frustrating. Because on the one hand, as recently as yesterday, you've seen, in the media, the Premier talking about how the Spencer Gulf region is on the cusp of an industrial renaissance, blah, blah, blah. Massive investment going into hard infrastructure. What we haven't seen yet from the state government is any other form of investment in our city, particularly around the housing piece and around community facilities and amenity that we know is needed to support an increased population. So until we get something from the state government, we are remaining steadfast in saying, look, we're confident about what the future is, but we're not prepared to put any numbers in our forward plan until we get something from the state government in particular. I'm hoping that it's only now a matter of weeks or months before we can actually start getting a better handle on what the state government's intentions and planned investment is. Until we get those very clear signals, we are being very focused on trying to live within our means. Probably about 2-3 weeks ago, we wrote to a number of sporting clubs who all want brand new facilities. None of these clubs can actually afford to pay for brand new facilities. We actually wrote to them and said, the council's not in a position to be able to provide what you're looking for. We need to move towards common or shared use facilities and infrastructure. We cannot continue to do what we've done in the past. These are really difficult conversations to have, particularly when we've also got our local state member who has committed through the last state government election $6 million towards a new Rec and Sports hub. We also wrote to that state member and a number of other key people in state government to say, council is not sustainable. We cannot afford to assume more assets at a greater expense to our ratepayers. The clubs need to be self-sufficient and need to basically pay their way. And we haven't seen anything from the state government or the clubs to indicate that those discussions are even happening. I'm actually very happy to share that correspondence with the audit committee, because it sets, I think, a very clear frame of the environment that we're trying to conduct ourselves in at present, noting that hopefully it's only a matter of time before, using the analogy, the floodgates open and a lot of things start to flow.
Just on that, how much is the onus on us to almost paint that vision to the state government to say, we've got the ability to create 1,000 new houses and create this much new investment and infrastructure and jobs in the area, which will lead to whatever, and almost paint that picture to give them something to hang their hat on, versus the other way, wait for them to make the announcement and say, by the way, we're going to need this. And I don't know what the answer is. The question is, how much is shaping it versus actually being
It's a really interesting question, and I'll go back to my preamble comment. The last 2 years with this, our interactions with the state government have been absolutely frustrating to the extreme. On the one hand, if you listen to the Premier and some of the ministers and you hear the narrative coming from them, you get a very clear picture of what the opportunity might represent. You then talk to another agency, such as Renewal SA, and say, we've got a significant housing crisis now, and we've got a tsunami of housing need coming our way. Renewal/state government, can you please work with us and support releasing land and supporting housing development in our city at scale, not as they've been doing through their essential working, where there's 4 houses in Port Augusta and 6 houses in Mount Gambier. We're not talking numbers on our hands. We've got state government agencies like Planning and Land Use Services that have commissioned Oricon to do a review of housing needs going forward. They've identified that we need something like about 1,600 houses in a low growth scenario. You listen to the Premier, he's not talking about a low growth scenario. So you've got government agencies saying, here's the numbers. And then you've got other government agencies saying, we don't believe the numbers. And we've been going like this for 2 years, and no one wants to commit a number to target. And I apologise, my fellow Whyalla colleagues, I'm just doing my little soapbox rant here. So back to your question, on the one hand, in theory, the state government is driving the agenda. They're putting the investment into the region. They're supposedly working with the federal government in terms of the federal government's investment in the region. You might have noticed recently that the federal government made announcements that was disconnected to the state government. State government also has just recently missed out on the Hydrogen Head Start funding. So there appears to be some inconsistencies between what's happening at the federal government level and state government level. Introduce the housing accord. Our state, in theory, I'll say in theory because it hasn't happened in practice, our state in theory needs to deliver 16,750 houses every year for the next 10 years. The best our state has done in recent times is 14,000, and that was fueled by the home builders grant as part of the stimulus package. Leaving that aside, I think on average we do about 11 or 12,000 houses per year. So there is federal government money and a housing accord with the state governments to deliver significant housing in South Australia. We keep waving the flag and saying, if you're going to put houses anywhere in South Australia, Whyalla should be where it should be. So, in theory, there's a level of assumed knowledge that should sit with the state government, but that assumed knowledge to date, and I may be naive and maybe just optimistic. I'm hoping within just a matter of a couple of weeks, maybe all of a sudden some of that assumed knowledge will actually land and the state government will make some announcements. And I can then get off my soapbox and say, well, we've been knocking on state government doors, and it's not one door, it's 20 doors consistently for 18 months saying we want to work with the state government, we want to put together a precinct partnership to the federal government. We've put ourselves forward and said we want to be shoulder and shoulder to the state government. We want to be a genuine party to delivering on the state government's economic statement and the economic opportunity. But beyond the investment in hard infrastructure, in particular hydrogen jobs plan, to date, we've not really got a lot to show from the state government in terms of what that investment may look like. Having said that, Minister Champion has committed $100,000 to a master plan, citywide master plan. And I apologise if I'm repeating some stuff that I might have said back in the December forum, but just in case. My sense is that master plan, the greatest beneficiary of that master plan will actually be the state government, because most of the land that's not developed in Whyalla is actually state government land. So if anything, the master plan should inform the state government's investment decisions going forward. And when you see the correspondence that we sent to our local state member just recently, it's saying, look, clearly we're not seeing what the state government's picture is, and I might defer to Mayor Stone in a minute. Mayor Stone, together with the mayors of Port Augusta and Port Pirie, had the opportunity to meet with the hydrogen cabinet task force. And again, we might have talked about this in December. I forget the timing? Did we discuss that?
Really?
Yeah. So that was an opportunity for the mayors to hear in confidence from the cabinet task force, what their plans are. Stone, did you want to provide a synopsis of what you heard in terms of the state government's plans for our city and the region?
Thank you, Justin. Actually, I consider it was very much an anticlimax. I don't believe there was a great deal of new information that came out of that meeting. Other than the Premier announcing that he intended, and he had taken it to cabinet at that stage, intended to come up to the three cities and runs and summits, which we have now been advised will be happening. Yes, it wasn't a lot I considered was confidential, but I guess we were expecting to come out of that. Certainly at Spencer Gulf Cities, we've been pushing the same barrow with the same issues, very much that we've got here in Whyalla. So no, there wasn't a lot of anything confidential that came out of that meeting.
Just while you've thanks, Phil. Just while you've opened that up, do you see any value in and I'm dropping this on the committee as we speak, the committee actually attending that forum and summit in February to try and get to the key people and push the case along with, I suppose, the executive being the mayor and the chief executive. Do you see value in us being part of that? Probably to you.
I guess
Phil?
it depends what their agenda is going to be. They've announced a community barbecue in all three centres and then a summit. What's the summit all about? What are the announcements? Are they genuinely looking for community input, saying they want this to be a community barbecue? Certainly, if we had more information about what they're actually trying to achieve, and it does seem to be put together in a piecemeal type of approach from the very first phone call I had a week or so ago to say, oh, well, look, yeah, just giving you a heads up, it's going to happen, but we're not sure when, where, and how. It could be of value. I'd hate to see you going to all that trouble to be here if we don't know what they're going to be talking about. I presume we'll get more information from them, but it's very difficult to do long-term planning. I mean, the end of February won't take long to get here, and at this stage, it's purely 3 dates in February and 3 events for the 3 cities.
Justin?
Yeah, I might add to the mayor's response. I think and I do apologise. I'm being very glass half empty today. I try to be glass half positive. My sense at this point in time is that it would be a complete waste of your time to attend the forum on the at the end of February. What I would suggest or recommend is maybe very soon after that forum that we seek a meeting with the Premier and key ministers and maybe request for the audit committee to be party to that. And then we can frame what conversation we have with the state government, knowing what announcements, if any, they've ended up making at the end of February. If they come to town and it's just the Premier talking about how exciting the future is and there is no very black and white announcements, then I think given our financial situation and, you know, the little soapbox rant that I just had, I think it's time that we escalate or try to escalate the conversation with the state government to say we do need the state government to work with us, and we need to have, you know, some sense of what the planning is going in. I probably just need to add, whilst I've been quite negative, we know that there's a lot of government agencies doing a lot of work with a focus on the Spencer Gulf region and with a particular spotlight on Whyalla. So we know that the likes of Department of Innovation, Industry and Science is doing a whole heap of work around workforce projections, workforce requirements. There's a number of state government agencies and not-for-profits and like working around, you know, workforce attraction, workforce training and development. So we know that there's a whole heap of work being done around the workforce and skills development. We know that Renewal is doing some work, so that's not that they're not doing any work, so I probably need to be fair to them. They have identified 4, 5, 6 sites of interest, and they're going through the machinery of government at present to have those pieces of land come across onto the Renewal balance sheet, so that Renewal then can actually transact on that land. So we know that those things are progressing. We know that Office of Hydrogen Power is actively, as we speak, looking to try and work out how it's going to meet its housing needs for its project. And again, maybe more in confidence later. I can unpack that a little bit more in terms of what that will look like, but that will be a combination of probably some offtake agreements with some existing cabin providers, and then also work camps singular or work camps plural. It's not what we wanted. Spent 18 months trying to get in front of that and say, we can see what's coming. Can we talk about something other than work camps? That's where we are as we speak. So
I think your proposition in relation to we see where the summit goes and then seek then to reposition that post that. I like that. Guys, comments on that?
I think it makes sense. I mean, I agree with what Laurie said about the plan. I also understand the view that we actually can't reasonably envisage that, to push that, but you know, eventually crunch will come and there will have to be decisions made, and you know, a few more weeks, if that's what it is, to help that process is probably not a bad thing. So I think I agree with everybody really, which is most unusual. But and I think it makes sense that we wait until then, and then you look at what repositioning needs to occur. The other thing I'd say just about the long-term plan is we've separated out the airport, which I fully understand. Basically, we say it's not going to be private in years, and we're looking at stuff. But it sort of, my only concern about that is that if you take it out and look at it separately, and I know why we're doing it, and that makes sense, you have to be really careful that you then just don't ignore it and not really go for, well, how do we turn that around, because it's not part of the main picture.
Yeah, they're subject to a separate service review, so that's what gives me that comfort. Based on where that comes in, then influences I suppose, that longer term plan that we've got. So
I mean, I
get the
guess all
script
I'm
out.
saying is that it's just a warning there, or like, be careful.
Yeah.
Because when you do hive stuff off like that, there is then a tendency to go, well, that's being it's not part of our big picture, whereas it is part of your big picture.
Yeah, if I can just respond to that. We're waiting for the service review, obviously, to see what comes out of that. But my personal view, emphasise it's personal, it's not yet been tested with the council or with others, is that the greatest way of turning the airport around is actually to increase its commercial return to council by getting more usage beyond what it's currently being used for. To that end, we have had discussions with a number of companies around things such as drones, electric planes, hydrogen fuel planes, et cetera, et cetera. Some of those opportunities, I think, potentially are very real opportunities for our city, given our location. And one of the companies we're talking to, we've just found out also has just recently secured a contract with Defence to supply and to do training around use of drones in terms of drone warfare. If you think about our location and with Coltana right next to us, we think that there's some really good opportunities there. So I just want to say to the audit committee that we've actually got a number of opportunities that we're actively exploring. Whether they come to fruition or not, time will tell. But we do think that there's huge opportunity in terms of expanding the commercial return from the airport.
Your sentiment's not lost. I think the key is around that service review, where to, but it is part of the overall numbers. So it's in there, and I don't think we can, as you said, ignore it and just treat it as a separate problem we've got to deal with.
Just one other thing, if I may, just very quickly, in terms of the airport, if you think about just the sheer volume of numbers of people that will be needing to come into and out of Whyalla, our current paradigm and the legacy that we've got at present, I think there's going to be mounting pressure for more planes and potentially companies coming in and out of Whyalla, just given the pipeline of workforce that will need to be coming in, not only for Whyalla's benefit, but if you look at a number of the other projects, the Northern Air Peninsula, Whyalla is the clear gateway. So I think, again, it's difficult to quantify exactly when, but when you see some of the numbers, just our GFG alliance with Liberty One Star, Liberty Steel and Simic Mining, just their numbers alone, before you talk about hydrogen jobs plan and the everything else, they're huge numbers.
I hope, and if it's not part of that review, what I'll be looking for is, we currently have a base position of running a loss. What would it mean to so what would be the uptick in the variables to get us there, so we get a feel for if it's passenger number, it's going from 1,000 a week to 2,000 a week, and is that achievable? So Grant, if I can leave that with you, because if it's not part of that overall review in relation to how do you step it up to make it profitable, I think that's something we need as a committee, probably at the April meeting, so we get a greater feel for, okay, how's it going to, what would need to happen for it to turn around? What are the variables? Because I looked through some of the numbers, and probably a bit unfair comment, but things like the childcare centre, we look at the projection we've got in a couple of items down the track, it's saying we're going to make a 50,000 more revenue because of increased placements, and the cost is 50,000. So, you're net zero on that one there. So I think we need to understand what would need to change to bring the airport to at least break even. So if you can take that action, please. Pat, back any more from you?
Yeah, no, that's the sort of thing that, rather than just accept that, look to what it takes and then how.
Likelihood of achieving that. Yep. Okay. Peter, you were okay, as you said.
All good, thanks.
From my perspective, and I go to the Excosa report as well, which I totally support what they're saying, is I do feel we're still kicking the can down the road a bit in relation to when we will break even. And I'm with Laurie on those years 4+. It's got assumptions baked in there around continuing increase to ratepayers, which I don't see as sustainable. And you look at the increases above CPI, at some point it's not going to be a livable city because of the rates being charged to 11,000 ratepayers. So I look at the next 3 years out to 27 and saying, from my perspective, that needs to be brought back to profitability, break even, because we need to be match fit when the government is ready. And as in that SCOSA report, they talked about just focus on your renewal side of it. The development side is we can't afford it at this stage. And we want to be ready for when the government are ready to do what they need to do, not off doing our own projects when we potentially do not have the resources, the bandwidth as an organisation to deal with what's being thrown at us from the point of view of the local government. So my view on this would be a cost focus in the short term as we wait for government, a stripping out of anything to do with new asset side of it, to then bring that, get us back to match fit, focusing around the cost for when the opportunity does come along. We're not dealing with legacy. We can deal with opportunity that sits on the table. So probably that's my feedback in relation to the plan. Again, we've provided that previously to council, and council have made that call around where they're sitting in relation to focus and priority from a business point of view. I'm very much aligned with the independent report that's come along. We've just got to be focused on the cost side, because I look at the projection in the Q2 forecast, and without the grant that's come along, we'd be in the hole and nearly another $1 million. And at the moment, I don't see us having a revenue problem. We've got a cost problem, because each time we set a number, the costs just blow out again. So the believability in the numbers as well, I know the rigor that goes around what Grant and his team put in place, and I'm totally support that. But then what happens is those numbers then shift because of events. There's no contingency in the number to deal with those at the moment. And therefore, that's why I think it needs to be stripped back to bare bones, match fit, focus, ready for what the government's doing, rather than adding on to our own playlist of what we need to do at the moment around some of those development activities. So they are my comments in relation to the plan. Laurie, Pat, or Peter, anything else from you guys on the plan itself? No, okay. We'll move into.
Can I maybe just ask a question? I'm not sure if that's where you're going, so I apologise if I was too early. How do we capture those words? Because I know you keep asking, what council is doing with the advice and commentary coming from the audit committee. Are you able to?
Well, hopefully the minute secretary can capture the essence of everything we've spoken about.
Check Lisette. Do you capture most of what Grant just mentioned?
You got it on tape anyway, I'm sure you.
Oh, actually, sorry,
you got the tape.
Through the chair, we're actually recording this meeting, and so the minutes will absolutely capture the substance and the veracity of what's been said.
Yeah, Kathy, and I'm happy to come along and speak to the council as the chair of the committee, just to provide the sentiment of the committee.
Yeah, I think that might actually be a good thing, Grant. We'll book you in for the February council meeting to come and present the minutes of this meeting to the council.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move into the asset management strategy. So Grant, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I guess with this document, nothing sort of huge wholesale changes. I mean, the focus of the document is really about the data, I guess, that sits behind it, and what it's telling us in terms of our spend. So really, I guess that what comes out in the appendices is probably the most important bit of the document. Obviously, the document has been updated with, as we're cycling through every year, and especially through every 4-year cycle. There's always quite a lot of improvement, I guess, in our asset management processes and strategies as we get our main sort of asset classes, the data that sits behind them, gets more and more mature over time. So that has been captured in in the document. Some of the forward focus and that sort of thing has brought out some of those items that have already been picked up. So, for instance, we've just gone through our transport renewal process last year, so our transport reevaluation process, and what that picked up for the first time, for instance, was unsealed roads and also captured traffic signals in there that sort of previously sat in a undeveloped asset class almost within our corporate system. So yeah, improvements like that. So I think a lot of our asset classes are now at a very mature level in terms of what data we've got, and allowing the teams to really push good renewal schedules out. I guess the next challenges for us is I think we've got our transport asset class itself to a really good spot. Buildings is the next challenge, but that's the data that we've got will help with that. So yeah, and so ultimately our renewal program that comes out in the appendices is really around the data itself and what it's saying about renewal spend that's required to renew assets as and when they fall due for that spend. A little bit of tweaking happens to just make sure that the programs are deliverable and you don't have huge spikes in any given year. So things might be moved sort of a year or two at a time, but not hugely moved. Yeah, and I guess the main thing is that this document is consistent with the long-term financial plan. So the renewal that's been built into that long-term financial plan document is consistent with our asset management strategy and what it's saying we need to be spending on our asset classes.
Thanks, Grant. Yeah, a very comprehensive document. So thank you for that. A lot of good information in there. I might go to you first, Peter.
No, nothing further to add.
Yeah, it was a very comprehensive document. It actually took a bit of work to get through it, and Daisy Pat would have probably liked slightly in the cover member
Exec summary.
The exec summary, some more details about what assumptions have changed and how it fits in as a connection back to what our terms of reference are. So it was much easier to tick off things in my mind that yes, 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 or no. But having said that, you could get there from reading through everything. But just for, I guess, future feedback, that might make it easier to review, and therefore might result in you getting better review points, I suppose, is all I'm saying from that perspective.
Yeah, there is an executive summary in there.
There is.
That's probably needs to be
A bit of work there.
kind of
Yep. I think you take that feedback on board.
And then I worked through most of it and got there. There were a couple of interesting things. I noticed that the committee itself is not mentioned as a stakeholder at all in the asset management plan. I note that. I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong, but
it is wrong.
You can take that action away to have that look at where we will be put in. Yep.
Page 50.
Yep.
There was one that didn't have any residual risk against it.
Yep. So all assets.
Yeah. And no, that's page 130. No, that's all right. Probably my main
Thrust. Okay.
thrust, I think.
Thanks, Pat. Laurie.
Yeah, same comments. It's a pretty comprehensive coverage of what's there. To me, it talks about what we need to do and how we need to spend to maintain everything that we've got. What I was looking for to understand was which of the asset categories, if any, are more critical. So if we had to come to a position at some point in time to go, what gets prioritised over others? What are the ones that A, are most critical to maintain? And then B, which ones are going to have the maximum impact for the community? And, if we needed to shape what we did and help shape the narrative around how we're best delivering outcomes for community, are we aligning our activity as opposed to having one happy balance of everything for everyone? Because we know that in the real world, it doesn't always work like that. So just helping to understand where we think the most critical asset classes are, either from a condition or a community benefit perspective, would be good to add to that as well. But otherwise, it's a pretty pretty complete document.
Grant, did you want to comment on that comment from Laurie in relation to around that priority focus and value?
Yeah, happy to. That's actually quite a good comment, I think, and I'm happy to have that as a improvement item for the document, because I think that it's probably at that point now. I think in the past we've probably been at where we've just been trying to get the data to, you know, to that really mature level. But I think it's at that mature level now, the data, and that we can start making those more, you know, bigger calls, I guess, maybe, or yeah, having that higher level discussion around priorities moving forward. So no, good feedback, and happy to build that in.
I think it'd be good if it's around like a heat map around what's important, what's urgent, so you get a feel for, yeah, this is the bits that if the rubber did hit the road and decisions needed to be made, this would be the trade-off there. So again, I don't think you probably have time to do it this time, but if you can take that one away. Laurie, anything else?
I think so.
Again, Grant, I thought it was a very good document. The key for me, I suppose, is always around the implementation. And I look at page 42, and it talks right at the top is, you know, what we'll do. And mine around that is what level of independent review is actually undertaken each time this activity occurs. I'm not saying it happens with the Whyalla Council, but, you know, people do have a job and they like to maintain their job, and they maintain their job by continuing activity. So where's that independence around challenging the decision each time around, do we need to do it? Do we need to do it better? Rather than, oh, we just roll it over because it's now on the schedule that we now focus on this point here. So again, I think if we can take that away, and when we look at the audit's got a program to look at the asset management strategy, and potentially it's one of those questions of what level of rigor is applied each time money is being spent on renewal, because a lot of focus is put around the new and business case, what's happening around the renewal side of it. So if you can take that piece away. The only other one for me is around that the new investment side of it as well. Comes back to that comment around financial sustainability and pairing it back just to core around renewal rather than new. So I think you've got the feedback there. The light touch in relation to community consultation, is that consistent with the organisation values and what SCOSA is saying around engaging with the community? From your perspective, I suppose, Kathy, Grant and Justin?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off to start with. I think when we sort of talk about light touch, we will certainly obviously be engaging the community to talk about our long-term financial plan and our asset management plan in comparison to, say, our community plan. Just as a reference point, we've done extensive engagement with the community. I think we're up to 7 or 8 workshops now. We've had, you know, over, Kathy will correct me, but over a couple of hundred different participants through the forums. We've had guest speakers. You know, we've hit that one pretty hard. And in terms of the hierarchy, that community plan really should be at the apex. So a lot of the conversations that we've been having with the community through that community plan talk to what are the needs or demand or needs or wants in terms of services and service levels. So, and we also obviously have our annual business plan and budget process, which again, we don't just tick boxes like some other councils. We've, you know, just holding a public meeting. We, you know, have focus groups and workshops and the like. So there's no doubt we will do some consultation, but I don't think we would put all the bells and whistles on it as we have done with the community plan. But I'll just defer to Kathy. Do you want to add anything else, Kathy?
No, I concur with everything that you said, Justin. And certainly one of the things that we're yet to do with these 2 plans is to really demonstrate at the front end their links to community plan and how that will flow through into the council decision making around its long-term financial plan and asset management. You know, we have engaged very significant month with the community. One of the part of the engagement though is taking note of the comments from SCOSA in the context of where SCOSA believes there would be better clarification for the community as some of the that's been taken by council. We'll take that on board as part of the information that we put out to the community for this engagement process.
Thanks, Kofi. You broke up a bit in between that, but I think we got the sentiment you're going through them. Okay, so the recommendation is that as it stands on page 29, I think we just identified that the feedback as identified above. So we've got all the feedback there. So if I can have a mover, thanks Pete, and a seconder, thanks Laurie. Are we comfortable with that? All right, capture within the body. Can I ask if we can have a 5-minute break? I've got to go and feed a meter in case I take my car away from me. We can have a quick 5-minute break and then we'll be back with you. Okay, so the normal resolutions of the break. Mover, Peter, seconder, Pat, all those in favour. Okay, we'll move into a break. Thank you. Grant, over to you, budget Q2.
Thank you. So getting into this one, I guess I note the comments previously about the budget position really being held up by the grants that we received, sort of offsetting a number of mainly one-off items potentially this year. I guess the one saving grace is that the things that are coming through this year compared to last year seem to be one-off events rather than large ongoing increases like we had with electricity and such last year. And I will note that I think that's been part of the committee's concerns have been taken into account in how we've structured the long-term financial plan review, so that with these extra grant streams, I guess, that we've got ongoing, with our increased allocation, we haven't just used it to improve our projections. We've used some of it to actually increase our capacity, because we do know that the audit committee's comments in that, and we know it as well. There's very little capacity in the budget to deal with unknowns, and so trying to build a bit of that back in to the plan, where we've got this sort of one-off ongoing positive impact as well. So yeah, I do note that that there are a lot of one-off negative impacts on the budget that have been offset by the additional income. I've tried to structure the report, the annexure, a little bit differently to make it a little bit clearer. Obviously, when we do our budget reviews, there are lots of sort of ins and outs that just you sort of have to report because there's extra income and extra expenditure, so they do need to be in there, but they don't actually impact council's overall result or ongoing have ongoing impacts on council. So tried to make it clearer the ones that are sort of having a positive impact and a negative impact that aren't sort of naturally offset by some other income stream. So that's the colour coding that we've added into the annexure. But happy to discuss and take questions on anything in the report.
Thanks, Grant. Pat?
I mean, obviously there's a few negatives, and it's pleasing to get the grants to offset those. And I understand what you're trying to do in terms of use of those grants. Something that was raised earlier was you notice when you look in the detail that you've got a 50,000 increase in fees from the childcare centre, but that's offset completely by a 50,000 increase in wages. So I'll be quite interested when the service review comes through, because what that would suggest perhaps is that the fees aren't being set accurately, or something's not quite working, because you can't logically operate a centre at zero.
Yep. So we'll wait for that review.
Yeah. I don't think I had anything else specifically other than noting
Okay, Pete.
that.
Thanks, Grant. I'd just like to say, Grant, I thought that the explanations were quite comprehensive. Certainly gave me a better insight than I've had before. I'm just curious, on page 131, there's a mention about the reduced costs of rental properties for council employees. It's only 30 grand, but what's the detail about that?
Yeah, so council has a few arrangements where we rent some properties and then completely on charge that to a number of employees. So that the history behind that was a few years ago, it was just an opportunity to get access to those. There was a few employees coming online at the time, and as you know, the local rental market is quite, tight. And so I had a few employees coming on that were from external to Whyalla. So we picked that up as basically we had an expense of the rent that we paid, and then we recharged it through payroll. Two of those arrangements have now ended out of the three, so we've only got one of those in place now, and this was just recognising the reduced cost and income relating to that.
Thanks, Grant.
Laurie?
How well across all of this is council generally in terms of these deficits and the level of comfort with going into the additional deficit? Probably question number one. And then number two, how much flex as an organisation do we have to make changes during the course of the year to try and offset any of these changes? Let's assume grant income doesn't come in as expected. Are we just reporting the number and it is what it is, or do we have ability to actually seriously impact it through the activities we do, and how much flex and at what point do we have the ability to make some of those changes?
So we'll take the first one around the level of depth of understanding and discussion at a council level. So I might go to Justin on that one, and then probably to you, Phil, if you're okay to answer that one as well. So Justin, first to you.
Yeah, so the council, this information that you're seeing is what goes to council. So in terms of are they privy to and understand the numbers, we like we will with the audit committee, we'll go through and respond to any questions and the report is presented. In terms of the council's comfort in going further into debt, I think the elected members all are uncomfortable with being in an unsustainable position. All of the councillors understand that that's not acceptable, it's not tenable, or it's untenable, I should say, over the longer term. So there is a very keen desire from the elected members that we do get back to an operating or balanced position. In terms of flex within the organisation, as we've discussed previously, there is very, very limited capacity we've got within the budget. You know, there is no contingency funds. We don't have, a lot of discretionary funding that we can sort of turn off if some things go the wrong way. Most of the time, we'd have to look at things like projects or renewals, and with renewals potentially deferring them, but that obviously has a knock-on effect in terms of the asset figures. Beyond that, as you'd expect with any council, you start talking about service levels and staffing numbers, and it's not easy to change service levels or change staff numbers quickly. I might, before getting the Mayor to respond to that first question, just see if Grant wants to add anything in terms of the flex side, in terms of capacity to absorb unplanned variations, particularly negative ones.
Yeah, I echo Justin's comments that there is very, very little capacity in our budgets to deal with unexpected or unknown events. Within, I guess, our overall operations, we do have a little bit of flex in terms of there's enough activities going on that, there will be years where certain things naturally have a lower than expected maintenance sort of events that happen, because there's always a mix of proactive and reactive maintenance. So there is a little bit within operations to sort of address different things across their broad range of programs. But when anything big comes in, and some of those are noted in here, there really is little capacity. And as I said, part of what we're trying to do with the budget and the long-term financial plan is to build a little bit of that capacity back in. I guess one of the things we probably used to use is, we've always in the past fully budgeted our FTE budget, and you naturally have that little bit at the top where you've got natural movements between positions vacant for a small period of time, and that sort of, I guess, provided that little bit of movement in terms of unknowns for council as you were travelling along. Assumption we built into the plan in trying to repair the LTFP a couple of years ago was actually building in a vacant FTE allocation that sort of picks up that natural turnover. And that's all well good. So our labour budget sort of comes in about on budget, but it took away, I guess, that's one of the small capacity items we might have had in our budget. And so part of what we've done with the grants ongoing is to reduce that assumption around vacant positions, so we have got a little bit more capacity in the budget. So yes, so there's not huge. There's very little capacity, and that's reflective in the fact that there's probably more negative items in the budget listing than positive ones.
The reason I ask is, for me, it's if we're going to put a picture like that, we should be saying anything, if at all, options we would potentially have to address the shortfall. If it means it's only, changes to services or it's something like that, at least providing information to council to help them to understand what the alternative courses of action are. 'Cause if there's nothing, there's nothing. If there's something, we should at least be having that discussion so that it's an informed decision to say we've got an adverse outcome. These are the things that are causing it, and there's nothing we can do about it, or these are the things we could do. Make a decision as to whether we're happy to go where we are or no course of action. So that's perhaps just some feedback for me.
I think that is worthwhile capturing in future projections in relation to around what are the levers that are available, what is the level of scope, and the impact on the business by doing that. Because part of it could be, well, you're running a vacancy rate at the moment. It could be everybody is required to go on annual leave and not replaced because it's paid out of provision, or there is a no replacement policy, or there is a no spend on new activity policy. So I think it comes around, these are the things you could do, and council then make an informed decision whether they're willing to swallow that or just accept the position. Which you would normally see in a larger business is around just not acceptance of here's the overs and unders. Well, make a conscious decision around, are you willing to pull a different lever? That doesn't mean you have to pull it, but at least it's in front of the council around, well, they're the opportunities available for you. So if we can have that for the next one, Grant, I don't think it's a lot of work in relation to, because in the end, it comes down to employees or around activity and projects is where you colour. And this is what the priority would be. If council's come back and said, no, you've got to find $1 million, how would you do it? This would be your hit list to do it. Does that cover that off,
Yep.
Laurie?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else, Laurie, from your point of view?
In fact, a number of organisations that I'm involved with actually have that hit list made up at the start of the year. This is our contingency list for if things go
To shit?
Yeah. In a priority sense, and then it's just always there. And when something nasty happens,
Good options.
you've got options in front of you.
Phil, did you want to make a comment from a council point of view?
I don't think I can add much more than Grant and Justin have said, other than I do believe the current council would be flexible with issues, provided the information was advised to council sooner than later, so we can all be part of solving that particular issue. But I think they've both expressed it fairly well. Yes, flexibility is a little bit difficult, but provided the elected body is kept in the picture if there is a growing issue from the outset, so we can all work together to see what can be done.
Thanks, Phil. I don't have a lot of comments, Grant. You are across your numbers, and that gives me confidence. But it is the bouncing ball that you are seeing, the ups and downs, and it's always to the negative. Thankfully, over the last 2 years I've been involved, we've seen additional grants come through to smooth out part of that issue. But I'll go back to then my comment with the previous discussion around, we've got to be match fit. So we just got to scale it back to a BAU business, because this flexibility or this volatility is not one-off, it's happening each year. And we just can't wait for that, that Hail Mary ball each time being the grants coming from government to save us. To sit there and say, well, at the start of the year, we're happy with a budget of negative 2.5. We were happy with it, but unhappy because it's negative. Now to be sitting at 3.4 million. And if you take the grant out, that windfall we've got, you're over 4 million. That's almost 100% change in a position. That's material. That's the bit where we've got to scale the business back to basically live within our means, because it's not happening at the moment, because of not only what we're doing to ourselves, but the external forces at work around these costs that keep coming through to us that we cannot control. All right, so we've got the resolution there. I think we are recommending it and recommending the adjustments to the long-term financial plan. So can I have a mover? So it's page 124 recommendations. Thanks, Peter. Seconder, thanks, Pat. All those in favour? Passed. Again, Grant, thank you for the work you've done there and the commentary around the variances. It paints the picture very easy for us in relation to what's happening. The key is, what are we going to do about it? All right, I think you've got the floor again for 2.3.
Yes, thank you, Grant. So this report here is part of our financial internal control processes. We do undertake an annual self-assessment process against the better practice model, which is used by the local government sector as a whole, and is actually legislated now in the financial regulations to the Local Government Act. And so this process is a two-part process, I guess. So we've got a whole bunch of, actually there's probably more parts than that. So we've got our overall structure of controls that sit in that better practice model. And a number of years ago, a sort of risk assessment was undertaken against them to sort of look at residual risk in each of those. And then they were grouped into sort of three groups of controls. So you've got the extreme and high level ones are in the annual review group. The medium risk ones are in the 2-yearly review group, and the low risk ones are in a 3-yearly review group. So we cycle through them. So only once in every 6 years we end up, they come together and you have to review all of the controls, because there are quite a lot, about 200 something altogether. So this year we were reviewing the annual ones and the 2-yearly ones. So then it's basically a two-part process. So you've got someone who does an initial assessment, and that's normally someone who is close to the control themselves, who goes through, checks their processes, explains what they're doing, and provides evidence required for that. And then it goes to a reviewer, so at least their supervisor or someone separate to that process, to sort of check their comments and their assessment of how well it's operating, and then gives their assessment. So there is obviously quite a lot of information, data in it. In that, I guess what we found from doing this process, nothing of great concern internally. I think the ones that were sort of flagged as only partially effective or lower were ones that we already knew about, and I guess a lot of them are the ones that are ongoing improvement processes. There's not an immediate risk to council. It's items that need resources to go towards them if we're going to improve those processes, but that's probably going to be over a long number of years process, rather than being something that needs actioning straight away. There needs to be a fix put on to stop risk, or risk of fraud or something like that. So happy to discuss through any of the small amount that are on that list. And as I think the one thing we probably need to do, get a second to do it, maybe later this year before we do the next round of assessment, is to maybe revisit that initial risk assessment for the groupings. Now that we've gone through the cycle a few times, we don't want to do that too often because it's a big job, and the whole point of having the three groups is to do that for a number of years. But there was commentary from the previous audit committee that potentially some of those assessments were a bit higher than they needed to be, and so there's probably more of the control this year. Look at that. And then just the financial control itself was due for review. But yeah, nothing too major from that change. Mentioning earlier with the asset management strategy that it didn't actually reference the audit and risk committee. This policy didn't need us. A reference to the audit and risk committee and their role in this overall process. And just a tiny tweaking around.
Thanks, Grant. Your voice is bouncing around at the moment, so I don't know if that's your end or our end, but I think we got the majority of that. I'm getting nods. Okay, we'll do with this in two parts. We'll take the self-control assessment for comments, and then we'll deal with the policy changes. So, the self-assessment, Peter.
No further comments, thanks.
I'm not sure which is which here. I guess a couple of things. Yes, I think it's time you did another risk management comprehensive review. 4 years is a long time between risk management reviews for an organisation. Secondly, I found it interesting where it's the comment on page 139 that 139 that a number of the actions don't need to be monitored as their long-term improvement processes rather than short-term actions. But if you look at some of them, like credit card usage, they're actually one of the prime areas for fraudulent activity. And we've got here, if you look at the table, you know, there's issues with credit cards being used. I just get a little bit uncomfortable when I see a combination of those things, because that's where issues actually do happen. And so it feels to me like it's a bit relaxed around some of those issues. And I don't know if it was me, but I thought the table had a lot of duplications in it. So
It did. But Kathy, did you want to comment on that? Probably around the benefit side of it to council members and the cards. That's the two bits, I think, where Pat's honing in on, is that's where you normally people get a personal benefit that they shouldn't be.
Yes, I mean, certainly the utilisation of credit cards is an area that needs to be constantly under review and monitored in terms of compliance against the policies, etc. So, you know, I think, you know, the ongoing process of monitoring and timeframes, we are seeing improvements happening at the moment. We have been talking with officers concerned in terms of, you know, the importance of ensuring that that improvements come through and that invoices, etc., are provided as part of the checking of credit cards. So we are absolutely monitoring that. Very happy for it to stay on a monitoring list for the Audit and Risk Committee, because yes, whilst we are keeping it under review and also conscious that the external auditors certainly audit credit card usage as well, very happy to keep it on the monitoring of the Audit and Risk Committee's action statement.
You can easily fix it if you don't comply. The card's cancelled. You can fix the.
Yes, that is absolutely one of the strategies.
Anything else? This is on the overall self-assessment side of it, which had an attachment separate as well.
yeah.
Laurie?
No, nothing further to add to the discussion that's already been had.
Have we shared this with BDO?
Not yet, but we will.
Okay, it'd be worthwhile sharing it with them and probably getting any comments that feed into this process as well. Kathy, for us, if we can come back with that. I'm generally comfortable with it. I think it's well controlled. But let's run it across BDO because they may have some improvements around that. Let's move into the policy itself. Grant, did you want to add any questions? It's fairly self-explanatory what you want to do. Again, I think if we can run past BDO as well as our internal auditor, just a couple of clarification points for me. On page 147, where we talk about a number of controls may be flagged as long-term improvement items. One is, yep, great, but so what? So you flagged it, who's controlling it and what's happening with it? There's something missing from a policy point of view. You've got a flagging, but what does that flagging actually mean? That it's delegated to executive to then work out when it's a priority to do, or how does that hold together?
Yeah, I mean, that was my thinking, and so maybe it needs some extra wording around that. That there's probably two different types of actions. There are the actions that need to be actioned immediately because they pose a risk to council immediately, or a fraud risk, a loss risk, as opposed to some of the ones that are on this list here around improvements in overall project management processes, that sort of thing. That it's not going to happen immediately, and it is long term, and it is about resourcing and whether what the priorities for council are, and that it's not actually posing necessarily an acute risk for council. It's more about just assessing our overall continuous improvement objectives. So happy to add some wording in here about the two streams and then how each one of them is actioned. That maybe I think the thinking was that the actionable ones that are more immediate are definitely monitored by the Audit and Risk Committee on an ongoing basis, whereas some of those other long-term ones are probably monitored more at the exec level in terms of resourcing.
And I think if I can through the chair, I mean, this is also about in terms of resource availability and level of risk, and are we prepared to accept the level of risk for a period of time given resource availability? And so I think that we can probably further elaborate some of that wording in the policy, and that gives more of an indication as to where that balance needs to be reached.
Well, if you take that line, then if you take out in some cases, delete that and have where the risk to council are not material, blah, 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 may be flagged as a long-term continuous improvement item, is to be reported to the Audit and Risk Committee and delegated to the Executive Committee for action and priority. So you've still got it's coming to the Audit and Risk Committee. So yeah, we're happy that it is a continuous item. It's sent off the agenda and back on your agenda. Are we comfortable with that, Laurie? Pat, Peter? Okay, subject to inclusions of those words, Kathy and Grant, are you comfortable with that? Justin? Got nods? All right, so we got two recommendations. The second recommendation will be subject to the inclusion of the amendment noted above. Put the recommendation. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Laurie. All those in favour? Approved. Thanks for that, Grant.
Can I just say that 4 years is quite a long time for a policy. It's probably at the outer end of what is acceptable. 2 years, I can understand the view. Commonly, they might go to 3, but 4 is outer end. So you wouldn't want it to be longer than that.
Do you want to push for a change now?
No, just note that.
Again, we'll ask that feedback we received from BDO in relation to content around the cycle of review. You can take that as an action. Thank you. All right, item 2.4. In my discussions with Kathy, I've asked that BDO be in attendance for that item, given they are undertaking the work. They'll be available at 1 o'clock via Teams. Kathy, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I want to vary the agenda. Do I need to get a resolution to vary the agenda?
No, just the leave of the meeting.
Okay, we comfortable? All right, we'll move into 3.1 on page 185. Who wants to take this one?
Yeah,
Don't put your hand up. Okay.
I'm happy to speak to this one. So this is, yes, our quarterly procurement report that comes through. I guess the thing of noting we saw when looking through this one that there have, the number of exemptions, I guess, is higher than historical, quite a bit higher. We tend to sort of have 4 or 5 most quarters, and this time we've got sort of about 3 times that. We have looked through all the items and nothing sort of stuck out as being of great concern, and nothing really, it feels like a little bit of a one-off increase in the number of items. There were a few things that came together. There's a few IT related ones in here, which tend to be that happened around the same time because because of the nature of systems and compatibility and that, they're more likely to have potentially procurement exemptions. Some of them related to actually the move into the new building that, as we got here and noted, things that needed to be doing that we couldn't avoid. There were a few exemptions required around that. And there's a few in there as well where it's not that we haven't undertaken a procurement process, it's just that the procurement process might have varied from our processing, where sometimes there was only 2 qualified companies available to quote, and our procurement policy says that we'll get to obtain 3 quotes. So I think as we reviewed it all, there was nothing that stuck out as being any reason why it's higher. And so what we've put in there is that we'll monitor that through this report to the audit committee over the coming quarters to see that is actually the case, that there hasn't been a huge spike in exemptions for any reason, and that if we do note that it is a pattern, then we can have that discussion around what needs to happen with that in terms of process. So, but nothing else really of too much concern. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Grant. It looks very well controlled. Peter, questions?
Yeah, no questions from me, thanks.
Pat?
No, I mean, it was a little scary to look at to start with, and then when you went through it, most of them were
Tick.
relatively, it felt more comfortable going through the details. Yeah.
Laurie?
No, thanks for the report. Good.
I've got nothing. As I said, it's well controlled. Got the recommendation there of a mover from Peter, seconder from Laurie. All those in favour? Okay, we'll move into 3.2. Justin, do you want to deal with that one, or Kathy? Who wants to pick this one up?
Grant.
Grant, take it. Okay.
Yeah, me again. So yeah, this is so as we started this process last year, I think we committed to a sort of 6-monthly report to the audit committee on how this process was tracking. As outlined in the report, I think the process is tracking quite well. We've seen a good reduction in especially long service leave, number of people with excess long service leave balances. Annual leave on the surface of it looks like it hasn't moved that much. It's a sort of similar number of employees as the last time we reported in terms of where we'd got to at that stage from starting the process. But I guess the thing of note is we've had people come off of the list and new others come on, and the difference I think is that if someone pops onto the list, they've got just over that excess leave threshold of 8 weeks or whatever, and it's pretty easy to manage them. Whereas when we started this process, we were managing, in some cases, people with far in excess of that 8 weeks. So while the number of people on there is on the annual list, balance-wise and ability to manage is a lot easier and a lot better position. So I think the process is working well. There are a few employees that really did start with very big balances, and we recognise that some of those will take maybe a year or two to get off of the list because they might have had 25 years worth of long service leave that they haven't touched, and managing getting that leave down while still managing work requirements and that sort of thing might take a little while, but that's fine. I think those people are actively managing those balances down over a period of time. So I think it's been a successful process so far.
Thanks, Grant. Laurie?
Just as a general rule, how I know we're addressing the residuals, but as in an ongoing manner, do we have regular annual reminders or catch ups for people to take their leave so we don't get into this position going forward?
Yeah, that might be the next layer to start to add into it. I guess we implemented this process to manage the ones that are in excess. And I guess the difference with these ones is that we have a bit of clout under the award, the EB or the Long Service Leave Act, to actually sort of force people to take it in these situations because they are in excess of the things in there. I guess that's probably the next stage down, is to start managing it at the next level, that maybe, a report goes out when we get to 6 weeks leave instead of 8 weeks or something like that. So I'm happy that now that we've got this under control, that we can look at that next layer down of management of leave.
And I wouldn't be making a big fuss about it. It's just part of normal management practice that you're on top of it and you're just reminding people to have their leave book for the year. That's all.
If I can, through the chair, one of the benefits of a process of this nature is that it's being managed by the people managers themselves, and so all of the coordinators, every staff member that has got staff reporting to them is managing this, and so all of those people managers are aware of the policy position, and so are having conversations with staff and are actively managing and looking at leave. So I think that there has been some culture change within the organisation as a result of the introduction of the policy and the conversations being held.
Pat?
No, I agree with Laurie's comment. Other than that, you can make the report.
From my perspective, it's an operational report. I'm just questioning the value of actually coming to this committee, but that's a personal view. So we've got the recommendation there. Can I have a mover? Thanks, Laurie. Seconded. Thanks, Pat. All those in favour? Thanks for your work on that and the priority and focus being given. Just part of the workforce management activities of running a business. Come to the meeting. Kathy, I might hand over to you.
Yes, thank you through the chair, and welcome Kiffin to the meeting. As I'll take the report as read, Kiffin and his team have developed and reviewed our strategic risk profile, and following the risk workshop that was undertaken in December last year, have prepared the risk profile and also an internal audit plan which is aligned to that risk profile. I acknowledge that there is still a little bit more work to do in terms of the actual risk profile itself, in terms of populating further that profile or the risk worksheets with different risk management strategies and responsibility and so on. And that work will be undertaken over the next month or two once we have a new resource come on board. But certainly the work that's been done by BDO in the development of the internal audit plan has been reviewed by management. We are comfortable that the plan can be delivered from a resource point of view in terms of the city of Whyalla and also in terms of BDO. I'll leave it at that and hand over to Kiffin if he's got any further introductory comments.
I think you're on mute at the moment.
Yeah, very good. Always somebody, right. Sorry. Yep. Hope you're all well. I hear this COVID's been going around the place. It has been back here as well too. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to assume that the internal audit plan has been shared as part of your pack, and apologies, I didn't get a chance this morning to go through your pack, but you can see this is the risk assessment that we facilitated and all agreed on with the various risks. Now, and there's the description of the different risks. Now, hopefully I don't get, cause some people get a bit seasick. So what we then do is what's called develop a linkage table. And what we do is we have a look at the key risks and we look in regards to what projects could be undertaken to address those risks. So you've got across here the risks. So just tell me, so Grant, you've all you guys got the you've got this pack which I've sent that I'm stepping through. Is that right?
Correct. Yep. It's got it in front of us. Yep.
All right.
We've got everything you've got.
All right, no worries, good. So I just want to, I'll step through it, but I won't go into too much detail and then basically answer questions. But what we do is, here's the key risks. Here's the risks and here's the assessment from that facilitated session. As you know, there's more detail behind each one of these, but these are a descriptor of those risks. What we then do is we then go through and say, well, okay, what projects? So down the left-hand side here are the list of projects, and how they then can address then the touch points of those particular risks that are identified. We also, so we focus on projects to be able to address the high risk sooner rather than later. And what we also do is we take in consideration the timing as far as prioritisation of it, but also considering, Whyalla's budget in regard for internal audit. So there's no point as putting forward 5 projects if you can't afford doing the 5 projects. However, if they were highly, critical projects, then there would be projects that you particularly want to be able to focus on. So we balance in regards to, here's the projects, addressing your key risks, but also taking consideration your budget. And then there's we also do describe in there the different types of projects. There's compliance reviews versus performance reviews versus ICT, those type of reviews. So so you've got those projects, and these projects we've gone through, and we put these back to Kathy and the team to be able to then revisit and, as far as a draft, get their input into the process, and this is the result. So maybe if I stop there and answer any questions.
Okay, thanks for that. Is this what you'd normally expect to see from a focus and priority of a council? The items?
Yes, it is, and it does depend on as in the linkage table is what we do 101 for any organisation. So you do the risks and develop the projects addressing that. But back at a point when we were first appointed, the information we got in regards to Whyalla was in regards to for example, the financial situation and how crucial it is as it being a very important area, and that also came out in the risk assessment. So we're aware of that. So it's not surprising in your circumstance in regards to the budget establishment and monitoring and management being a particular focus area of review, and also the strategy and business planning about, okay, looking at where your strategic objectives are, what should you be focusing on? Are you focusing on the right things? Is the process in appropriate order of doing things? But in answer to your question, you can see why I'm a consultant, because I talk too much. But in answer to your question, for example, we've been appointed. We're doing the Gawler boundary review for council and with others. Their order of things would probably be slightly different in regards to versus yours. So, but I wouldn't be at all surprised as far as the headings down the left-hand side would be exactly the same for or very similar to any of the other councils.
Okay, thank you. Just your thought process when we look at the project reference number, why you would be looking at doing reference 1 before you do reference 2. So why looking at the budget establishment and budget management before you look at the strategy and business planning process? What's your thinking there?
Well, and you're spot on. I mean, typically you would start with the strategy and then the budget and the like flow on. But our push there was, our suggestion there in a discussion with others was to do with the council's financial situation. Turning any stone in regards to be able to therefore, sorry, using your name, Phil, anything to be able to find a way in regards to financial situation. So therefore, that's why we're looking at that one first. But if you weren't in a a financial need, then the standard process would be looking at a strategy, why you're here, what are you doing, and then the budget falls out of the strategy. But we'd be happy to turn those two around if you so desire. Remembering this is a draft internal audit plan, is not finalised until you guys have reviewed it and agree to it.
Yeah, I understand that. I was
I
just
might-
trying to understand. I just trying to understand the rationale. That was all.
No, that's fine.
If I might, through the chair, make a comment on that that question as well. The first draft of this plan that came through actually had probably those first two projects happening at around the same time, and I requested that the strategic and business planning process be delayed for a couple of reasons. One is that we are currently in the middle of our comprehensive review of the strategic plan, which will flow down through into, and as the committee has seen today, will flow down into the long-term financial plan, the asset management strategy, which will then flow through into the development and adoption of the annual business plan and budget this year. And so we felt that to undertake a review of strategic and business planning processes now, whilst we're in the throes of the comprehensive review of our strategic plan, etc., it was probably a bit too premature. However, given our budget position and our financial position, we did feel that we would be in a position to undertake that first project in relation to budget establishment, and so that was the decision that we took.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm going to open up. It's comprehensive. I'll open up for just general discussion and feedback from the committee before we go to the resolutions. Laurie?
Yeah, Kiffin, just to try and get a flavour of what the reports will look like. If we think about the budget establishment, monitoring and management project, would we expect out of that a report that focuses on the process to create a budget, or we're going to get stuff like you're maybe, I don't know, too aggressive or too conservative, or you're allowing activity to, go in a way that is going to steer you away from your outcomes, and the recommendations might be that you've got to change your level of services that you provide, or it's going to be more about the actual process in setting a budget?
It's more the process, but also the management of that process. So is the budget linked to the strategic plan, and then how is it monitored? And the thing is that, let's say, for example, the budget is established and it is linked, but then it's basically totally ignored, and you've got actual blowouts and there's huge issues, or that you haven't got a mechanism to allow for, things change, things occur, but exceptional circumstances about whether you're able to move and be able to manage with that. If there was a big blowout in an area, we'd be looking at it and say, well, why is that? Was that approved? Was that authorised? How was that managed and monitored? So it is process, because we're internal auditors, we're looking at the controls and the mechanism, but if we'll also be looking in regards to is it working, and how to make improvements on that. We're not looking in regards to, hey, look, you're spending too much over here versus over here. We will be looking at it in a sense of, hey, look, you're spending a lot of money over here and it doesn't seem to be aligned to your strategic plan, if along those lines, but we won't be looking in regards to your mix of your spend, which you should be, through your budget approval process, be identifying that anyway. But if we notice any issues in regards to the process and the approval process, monitoring process, managing process, we'd be identifying that.
So it is an assurance audit rather than a strategic audit then? The first one?
Yes, it is. I'm not sure. I don't think you're using our titles.
Yeah, it is actually identified as an assurance audit.
Yeah. So yeah, as you say, so this type of project focuses on the operational performance of the systems. So is it working right?
Rather than a more broader around the principles and stuff.
I mean,
Yep, Laurie, if you want to keep going.
No, I guess, and then contrasting that to say something like an external stakeholder relationship management. I guess the feel I'm just trying to get an understanding of is when we're relying on this function and the activities of internal audit, are we looking at it very much around the focus is primarily assurance, or is there a value for money / strategic advisory type function to it? And it's just trying to understand where we're positioned so that it helps us, with our thinking.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But so this here goes through your compliance audits, assurance audits, or strategic audits. So taking that broader picture, so it does include all those things. So there's elements of where you're quite right. There's an assurance side, but there's also on occasions where it could well be, hey, look, what can we do better? Look at in regards to strategically, so I use the term performance audits or strategic audits. So that, and we can look at it more strategic if you want us to be able to do that, but we'd propose to doing more of an assurance audit. And sorry for making you go a bit dizzy, but I'm just skimming down to the definitions, more explanation of what we're doing for each one of those. So this is the one which we're talking about doing this year, and that's an assurance audit, whereas this here was a strategic audit, and that was first cab off the rank in the new year, we're suggesting.
Yep.
Pat?
Yeah, I mean, they were my questions. I guess the only other one was, we happy with the order of the plans?
Yep.
And I note the ICT infrastructure is last.
Yeah, let's talk that. Given that, to me, this is a strategic order, and it would link into when we're looking at system strategy. What's your thinking there, Kathy, of that being pushed way out when at some stage in the next year or so, I'm sure you're going to bring that project back up to the Audit and Risk Committee as well as Council. So this is on the ICT infrastructure side of it.
Yes, I tossed up whether to bring the ICT infrastructure audit up earlier in the order of items. I heard towards the end or in 25-26, given the work that we are doing on the ICT systems. So, but I'm happy to take the Audit Committee's feedback in that regard and bring it up earlier in the list. But given that we are currently, or we recently had the assessment done of all of our ICT infrastructure by KAW Consulting, and given that we are about to commence pulling together a tender for proposals to actually go out to the market and test the market as to the renewal of our systems, that's why I urged on the side of putting it towards the end of the program.
Which comes back to why have a strategic audit in 3-year times when you've agreed on your strategy. It doesn't link back into what we're looking at doing in the shorter term. Then, Kathy,
if I may, for one thing is the risk assessment. What should be doing by best practice is to do a risk assessment every 12 months. So before this occurs, we'll have done one, maybe another two before this financial year, regards to when the ICT. So it could well be that ICT comes up the rank anyway because of your ratings of the risks and where things are at. And so that's one thing. Secondly, is that where there's a number of different occasions where projects get identified, but the client actually hasn't had an opportunity to be able to, they're in the throes. So for example, we're doing it with one council, we're doing asset management review, but they're actually identified themselves, 6-12 months ago, improved asset management practices, and in the throes of implementing it. And here we are coming back and saying exactly the same thing because they actually haven't implemented. So it's not adding any value. So it's a balance of get through your ICT, get that in place to a point. Either you do the review beforehand, so then you can get what you require in your new arrangement, or you do it after to be able to then test that it actually is doing what you're required to do. But I say that reality is, I think, given your budget and your situation, you're probably looking at what projects to do this financial year and next financial year, and whether bring them some of those ones forward, because I think you should really be doing a strategic risk assessment again prior to then anyway.
Thank you. Peter?
No further questions from me. Thanks, Grant.
Yeah, from my view, I'm looking, as Kevin just talked about, on that page of the first three priorities. I'm just struggling with the budget establishment side of it, given, I'm fairly confident we've got that covered and the value we'll get out of that. I take Kathy's comments in relation to that strategy and business planning process review that's being undertaken. I do see asset management as a key one, and that's in next year as well. So, the top three probably are the top three I'm looking at. The order probably have the strategic and planning process, but I'm going to take management's call on here around focus and priority, probably on that one there. So I'm generally comfortable with we've got the three key priorities happening within the balance of this year and next year, which is probably where I'm landing. So I'm probably looking for consensus from the group. Are we comfortable to accept it as it is, knowing that we then have a second go at it when the priority's set for the next period?
Yeah, and just keen also to see the level of, or the flavour we're getting out of the reports to make sure we're getting the right focus.
Yeah, I think the key there is we're very much focused around that strategic audit side of it going forward. So I think we are comfortable to accept the recommendation, if I can go to it. And Kathy, you can just take those comments into account with the relationship side of it.
Will do, thank you.
So the recommendation sits there on page 150. Can I have a mover? Thanks, Laurie. Seconder, thanks, Pat. All those in favour? Can I have a nod from you, Peter? Done. Passed. Thank you very much, Kiffin, for coming in via Teams.
No worries.
Forward to the first report.
All right, no worries. Look out yourselves. I'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. See ya.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, yep. The key for me, it's just not assurance reports. It's that higher level strategic report. Okay, we will now move into the confidential items. So we now go in camera, Kathy?
Yes, in camera for the first item, which is the report on the prudential considerations of the foreshore master plan.
We can't go in camera for all of four. There was one.
No, you have to. Unfortunately, you do need to pass separate resolutions for each item. So if you get a resolution for this one in the first instance.
All right, resolution. All those in favour, move a seconder. Thank you. Okay, we're now in that item. So.
Who moved it? Sorry, Grant, we missed it at this end.
Laurie moved
it, and seconded by Pat, and everybody was in favour. Thanks.
Yep.
Item 4.4, there is none. Item 5, nil. Item 6, nil. Next meeting is, are we going to call that a special meeting, the March one?
Yes. Yeah, sort of an extraordinary or special meeting, so it'll be outside the schedule. So if you want to just leave this one as
is. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Justin. And I'll close the meeting. Thank you, everybody.